Hello, and welcome to my presentation on Chapter 17 from Information Literacy, Research, and Collaboration Across the Disciplines. This particular chapter involves a case study at a New Zealand university program and the participatory research that was done to see how information literacy could be embedded in the coursework and curriculum throughout that program. As I said, the study was done at a New Zealand university and included 5 faculty, their students, 2 librarians, and the research team, and focused on their Bachelor of Resource and Environmental Planning degree. This was an interesting chapter after this week's reading because it really focused on taking all of the research and frameworks and what we as librarians know, that learning information literacy works well in the context of coursework and that interacting with students in their learning process is beneficial to their success. And it's taking all that information and finding ways to put it into action and offering a possible solution on how you actually move from these theories to integrating it into practice. At the beginning of their study, the main issues the researchers wanted to investigate were how to actually do the work of integrating information literacy into the curriculum, and specifically how to work with university faculty to help them incorporate it into their coursework and degree program. In New Zealand, the Ministry of Education promotes learner-focused pedagogy practices, emphasizing the joint responsibility of the student and the teacher in the learning process, and they place an emphasis on higher-level thinking skills like reflection. These principles dovetail nicely with the frameworks for information literacy that we were studying this week, and their study looked specifically at the ACRL framework as well as a new curriculum for information literacy framework, or ANSL. Both of these frameworks emphasize a movement away from a checkbox list approach of having specific skills, and rather they integrate information literacy in practice, emphasizing the process that can be used to retrieve, assess, use, and create information. However, despite these frameworks and concepts, they found that there was some difficulty in taking these concepts and applying them to curricula at the university level. They found that lecturing was still a main method of teaching, and that professors, while recognizing the importance of information literacy, often believed that these skills were supposed to be developed outside of their coursework. Therefore, embedding information literacy would depend on collaboration between these stakeholders in order to turn these theories into practice. So for the study, they worked with the faculty within the one particular degree program and focused on a couple cohorts of students. The degree program is a 4-year program, and so they wanted to take a look at how information literacy could be incorporated not just necessarily in the first year, but throughout the program, and how they could adjust the interventions that they provided for their students based on the changing and evolving information literacy needs of their students. For instance, a student working on their senior thesis would probably need more refined and different information literacy skills than a first-year student working on their first essay. So the main things they wanted to take a look at were to identify what types of interventions and what types of activities and assignments seem to help students develop the information literacy skills within the context of their courses, identify those key successes, and then also help faculty throughout the process adjust their curriculum as needed and adjust assignments as needed. And then they also wanted, within the research aspects of their program, to analyze their data for a deeper sense of how that research process and interventions worked with the attitudes that the faculty had towards their role in teaching information literacy and their own understandings of information literacy. So the 2 areas in particular that the participatory research focused on were library workshops and assessments within the course. Library workshops were available for first-year students, but they also incorporated coursework. They were incorporated into the coursework for 3rd and 4th year students to address their changing information needs. In library workshops, librarians worked with faculty to make sure that the workshops were more specifically tailored for the courses that they were attached to, and to make sure that the activities and types of work that the students would be asked to do in these workshops were relevant to that coursework. They found that having faculty present during the workshops was very useful, as faculty could comment during them and address specific student questions that the librarian who was running the session might not know, but the faculty member would. The workshops also incorporated opportunities for students to search and evaluate sources during that time, so that they had a chance to practice and reflect on the process and their experience with it, as well as get feedback right away about that process. They also found that assessments were a very good motivator for students, since if they wanted to do well in the course, they needed to participate in the assessments. So one thing that they found was helpful was tailoring assessments and assignments to actually be focused on the process of doing research itself. So one particular example, an assignment asked students to present 5 sources and then explain why or why not they would actually use them for their final project, and they were asked to present one that they had rejected and give the criteria for why they had rejected it, as well as ones that they felt were good, and explain why they felt that they would be good for their project. Another project involved students in a later course in their 3rd or 4th year to keep a reading and learning log, where they would find resources outside of the coursework and connect them to what they were learning, and to connect these real world examples to the theories they were learning in class and reflect. One of the key components of finding ways to put these theories into practice and then adjusting curriculum was the conversation that took place between the researchers, the faculty members, and the librarians involved, and even the student feedback that they collected as part of this study. While their conversations began as a way to collect data for the study, they found that it was through conversation that faculty were able to reflect and collaborate on ways to adjust their assignments and develop strategies to integrate information literacy skills into their classes. They also provided opportunities for faculty to reflect on their own practices and needs in order to provide good information literacy support for their students. So while individual reflection is a helpful constructivist practice, by collaborating and discussing these issues, it also provided a catalyst to actually further investigate the obstacles and challenges that faculty members were facing in terms of incorporating information literacy in their curricula. Discussing these issues with researchers helped them identify ways that they could improve their practice, and also helped uncover assumptions that faculty had about their students' research process and skills. For instance, how often students actually took advantage of learning support services, and the ways that they could, in the ways that coursework were really vital to ensuring that students actually practiced their information literacy skills and built on them. So this research provided 4 main implications at the end. The first is that it did confirm that information literacy development depended on how faculty promoted and integrated it within their curriculum. So it's good to have the data to back up that knowledge that we already anecdotally know. The second one was that a holistic view of information literacy can help faculty design tasks within the curriculum and help students engage with these concepts. The third one was really important, which was that collaborating with librarians was an effective means of teaching and planning for the information literacy instruction. So not simply just having a beginning course at the beginning of the semester, but rather really incorporating that throughout and bringing librarians into the conversation about planning these assignments, as well as restructuring them and modifying them as needed, really helped the professors hone their abilities to teach these skills within their classes, as well as knowing when to bring in information literacy experts, so librarians. And then finally, they found that the faculty really felt that there was a need for professional development in order to feel comfortable executing these strategies and concepts within their classes, especially those for whom this was kind of new to be teaching. Many of them felt that it would be helpful to have some research-based professional development to lean on. And of course, there's also the time constraints that are the time constraints that happen when you're trying to redesign your curriculum, but you still have other responsibilities as well. Faculty felt that they would need some support to make sure that they were getting everything done, as well as that they were doing it right the first time. So professional development was a possible solution that this research pointed to. So taking what we learned from this particular case study, I came up with a couple other questions to sort of reflect on in light of the other readings we did this week. So the first reading I wanted to bring in was the Miller article, and Miller had written, if we compare self-reported outcomes with quantitative evidence that library users experience greater academic success, we can demonstrate our active participation in the academic condition of higher education. So one of the questions that always comes up with this, though, are what are the ethics involved in doing this type of research? I would have been interested to find out how students who were participating and giving feedback about the types of assessments they were doing and about the helpfulness of the library instruction sessions, if they had maybe felt pressured to take part in some of these or to give a certain answer, and whether or not they felt like they were pressured to participate because if they wanted to take this course while this study was going on, they more or less had to be a part of it, it seems, or at least they might have felt pressured. So how would be a way to maybe mitigate that issue? But on the other side, does the greater good outweigh the possible risks here that having that information as quantifiable evidence to present to higher up library administration that these things are effective? Is that actually a greater good that's going to benefit more students and in the long run is probably better than maybe making students uncomfortable that they're going to be a part of this kind of experimental phase of changing how the classes are taught? So I think that the benefits here outweigh that risk, but definitely something to consider and to think about if similar studies were going to be performed in the future. Another question for further thought is that in this particular study, it was clear that the conversation and reflection that faculty had with researchers and librarians were really key in helping them to develop their curriculum and adjust their teaching methods throughout the process. In terms of applying this information, how might you as a librarian invite faculty into these kinds of conversations in a less formalized setting? These faculty members were doing it as part of a research project. So they had kind of a formalized structure to do this within because they were part of this project. When you're not part of such a setting, how might you just do that within the context of just the regular academic year? What kinds of activities might you invite them to participate in, especially considering what their motivation would be to spend that kind of time and effort in light of their other responsibilities. And finally, I mentioned earlier in the presentation that the researchers really used two main frameworks to frame their research on information literacy, which were the ACRL and the ANSEL, to develop the project and to develop the kinds of skills that they were going to be looking to incorporate within this study and within the faculty's curriculum modifications. So in the Grassian article that we read this week, there were a multitude of other frameworks out there that all followed similar principles and steps, but differed a little bit and could be used for different audiences. So were there any other frameworks that might have been helpful for this type of research or that you might have wanted them to see you might have wanted to see the researchers considering when working with this particular group of university students. Are there other frameworks that might work better in different settings? Just something to kind of think about, again, if you were to do this kind of research or this kind of project. So thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope that you found this case study to be kind of a nice contextualization of a lot of the concepts we read about for this week, and a helpful, useful example of how one might actually go about taking all that theory and putting it into practice. It sounds like from the write-up on this study that I read that this was a successful way to help guide faculty to incorporate these kinds of skills into their coursework directly rather than simply relying that their students were going to learn these skills either on their own time or in a different class. If you have any other questions or comments about it, please feel free to contact me. I'd like to talk to you about it. Otherwise, thanks so much.